This is Tommy's Outdoors 82, and our guest today is Dr. Ruth Allen. Ruth is a outdoors therapist. She's also an online counselor and many other things, facilitator, personal development coach, etc., etc. But the aspect of outdoors therapy was something that was especially interesting to me, and we talked about the benefits of outdoors for mental health many times on this podcast. And that's a subject that always is very interesting, and many people are interested. Many of you are interested in this subject. So I thought it's worth revisiting these things and these concepts every now and then. And what a better person than Dr. Ruth Allen to talk about benefits of being outdoors. And we also touch on many other things like the importance of unplugging from social media and from everything. Like, we constantly connected, and this is good not only to go outdoors, but maybe also to leave your phone at home. Also, we talked about how to deal with negativity, and somehow this is connected. And it's hard. We know that media, news, social media are bombarding us with negative news, and we need to find a way to deal with all that. And even I myself, I'm reading tweets or posts of my friends, and you know who you are. And sometimes I go like, oh, give me a break. So how to deal with that? So all these concepts and all these things we discussed with Ruth. Interesting episode. I loved it, and it was really like a breath of fresh air after a couple of like heavily scientific episodes that I brought to you. It was pleasure to relax and talk about outdoors and talk about the need of being outdoors. And I learned a lot, and I hope you will learn a lot from this podcast as well. So, as usual, remember to go to YouTube and subscribe to Tommy's Outdoors YouTube channel. Yes, I do have a YouTube channel, and all the podcasts, the video versions of those podcasts are available there, as well as some other stuff. Regular listeners know that, but if you're here for the first time, you might wish to check my YouTube channel or my Instagram page at Tommy's Outdoors. And so now, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ruth Allen and the importance of being outdoors and unplugging. Outdoors therapy. Welcome to the show. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Listen. Actually, you were requested, one of the requested guests. It's not happening very often that people are requesting guests, but you're a requested guest, and you agreed to come on a podcast.
Wow, I feel very fancy now. A requested guest, but
yes,
it's something.
Listen, I read through your bio, and you have many talents. So you're as far as I can tell, the main thing that you do outdoor and online counseling and therapy. Mm-hmm. But you're also an adventurer, and you're writer, and you're art maker. Why not artist? Like artist, the art maker. I find it interesting.
Good question. Good question. I don't know. Yeah, I don't feel like an artist. I feel like I make things.
Yes, I actually like that. I actually like that because I know from my past, a lot of people who want to pretend to be their artists. Uh-huh. And so they're not doing any art; they just are artists, and okay. that is being displayed at being, drunk a long time and doing all the crazy stuff. But where is actual art? There is none, but there are artists though. So you're on the other side, like you're an art maker.
Yes, I actually do sometimes.
No, I must say I admire your Adobe Illustrator skills, because I saw you're in Adobe Illustrator making those pictures, and like, whoa, that's some next level.
Thank you.
I was using Adobe Illustrator just to do like a plaque for my podcast. It's like, okay, this is it.
Well, I mainly use Photoshop now, I must say. I do also use Illustrator. But every time Illustrator brings out a new thing, it's kind of complicated, whereas I feel like Photoshop, it's consistently, I know where I'm at with the tool. So I recommend changing. Go to Photoshop. Right.
Okay. So listen, so you have all these fantastic things in your bio. You completed PhD in Himalayan geology.
Yeah.
So you trained geologists.
So I started off in geology because I wanted to spend more time in the mountains.
Right.
So when I was looking for an undergraduate course, I thought, what's going to be a really good passport to the mountains? So I thought geology. And it kind of made sense. It made sense. But as I realized over the years, and the more I did of it, until I got to PhD level, that actually I was spending more time in front of a microscope analyzing rocks than I was actually traveling. And I probably could do more mountain travel if I wasn't doing geology.
Right. It's a little bit like with Tommy's Outdoors podcast, which ended up not being outdoors, but being in front of the computer doing all the podcasts and all the editing rather than outdoors. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the problem of anything, isn't it? You love, you end up, a lot of it has to be done indoors. So, and I spend all my time telling people now about nature connection and well-being. And, I spend more time telling other people to do it than I have to do it myself.
Gotcha.
So it's, I think we're all kind of captured by this, aren't we? You get so passionate about telling other people that you forget to do it for yourself. Maybe that's like the human way.
Yeah. So listen, and then you traveled on foot through all the mountains in the world, or most of them. you run solo unsupported through Bosnian mountains. So, which is probably, I want to hear about that. That's a separate thing, and I bet you this is like a material for another podcast altogether. But for now, my question is where the therapeutical and therapy aspect came to that? Was it once you experience all these great things in the outdoors and in the mountains, there was whoa, I need to share that with people, or I need to, open their eyes to this, or did it, was it always somewhere?
I guess, well, as I say, I started working with rocks, and then eventually I kind of got to the stage where I thought this isn't enough, and so I was volunteering for the Samaritans over here in England, and I was increasingly interested in people and working with people, but I had these kind of two train tracks of my life. So the challenge for years was, how do I bring these together? And so part of me trying to work out my own way in the world and what I wanted to do was to go out and go walking and to go to the mountains and to go on long journeys and trips. And it just started to occur to me how much I use, not just how much I enjoy nature for itself, but how much I use it. I mean, I'm reticent to use the word use because it's very utilitarian, but using it as a resource to help me think through decisions. And I sort of just thought, what if I could bring together the outdoors and therapy, because I was moving more in that direction, having got a bit of an experience of sort of counselling at the Samaritans. So I just sort of thought, what if I could put these together, but not just loosely together? How could I do therapy? How could I take it out of the room? Because I felt that I wasn't particularly interested in sitting in a room in a kind of a clinical environment. I wanted to be moving. I wanted to sort of be in the fresh air. And so I decided to train in psychotherapy. But at the moment, you can still only go in via the regular route, which is indoors. And there's lots of post kind of qualification training popping up for outdoors, but I went into it thinking, well, I'll do my core training and then I will develop my outdoor practice. So it all came from that sort of, how does nature work for me, and can I offer that to other people?
Right.
And so it just gradually came together, and here we are some years later.
Right. And you think this is certainly has advantages over like a classical, like indoors approach?
I think it's different for different people. I think there's certain strengths to it. So in a way, outdoors, as I practice, is we walk a lot. So we're in movement a lot more than if you're sitting down. Not everyone who works outdoors does move as much. They might go and sit outside in a place. But so for me, it appeals if people are interested in working with their body. So in some ways, it's oriented towards a body therapy.
Right.
But also, there's the vitamin D, there's the fresh air, there's the physiological benefits that perhaps you don't get when you're sat in a room that are just working away in the background.
Yeah.
And I think I'm really sort of sold on this idea that nature in its own way is therapeutic without you having to do anything further. So I think and there's other kind of specific elements. So if you're walking side by side, for example, that's quite different to if you're sitting looking at someone in a chair. So it appeals to people who perhaps feel overwhelmed by being in an indoor space, who might really value a different quality of eye contact. So it just, and I find that people come to me who have said, I've never thought about counselling before. I don't like the idea of it, but I like the idea of what you do.
Right. And it's even, I read somewhere that your entire brain works differently when you're moving. It's even, I read somewhere recommendations for like knowledge workers, people who are, engineers sitting in front of a computer. They have that quite often they found a solution to the problem where they actually go outside or go somewhere. They're walking, but they're still thinking. I obviously don't remember all the details now, but there's like physical difference in how the brain works and how the different chemicals gets released through the bloodstream. Absolutely. That facilitates this how we think.
Yeah, there seems to be quite a lot of really interesting stuff around how it interrupts rumination. Different, like as you say, different kind of releases of different kind of chemicals or different signals. And, I guess we've known for a long time that changing the environment is good for creative solution making. So I think, the really physiological differences in what our bodies do and our minds start to do, and there's different processes that kick in when you're outside and you're moving. You don't just have to be moving outside, you could be moving inside. That's perhaps the difference, is that sense of movement and what happens in our brains, in the mind body connection. It's again, regular listeners to the podcast probably remember me saying that many times, but it strikes me like, for example, if you go somewhere to the countryside fishing or whatever you're doing, and you get out of the car, you have this feeling like a calmness. It's like everything is slowing down. And not long ago, I heard people talking about that when they go out for a long trip, and this is surely something that you can share your own experience. That when you go for a long trip, like either hike or hunt or whatever that is, and you're in the wilderness for a week, like day after day, like everything starts to slow down, and you're becoming more kind of aware of everything that's going, like it changing the tune, like your brain is tuning into the nature. And then the interesting thing I heard is like people who are spending really long time in the wilderness, they say like towards the week 5, it is still happening. You're still slowing down. It's like no sign of slowing this process down. So think about where you can go when you're like month. Yeah. Imagine how slow when you're just down to like the very core basics of existence. I mean, is it an exponential decay of just activity and movement? But I don't know. But you're right. You do slow down, and you, as you say, you attune to nature's rhythms, don't you? And certain aspects of modern life are also stripped away, and I suppose the time gets a lot more essential. So you're just going. There's something very ritualized about time outside. Prolonged periods of time in wilderness, it's eating, it's sleeping, it's walking, it's that rhythm and ritual I think, is important in that feeling of slowing down as well. And I think it's just, there's also that, the calming of the sympathetic nervous system. So when we're doing something like that, you're kicking into the parasympathetic nervous system. So rest and digest. So in a way, everything is conspiring, isn't it? When things are going well, that is, to bring your body into a state of calm that becomes almost meditative. But of course, I suppose this is one experience of nature. It's not, people can feel quite distressed outside. They can feel quite lost. They can feel quite, they don't know what to do. So I suppose it's not always the case that it's meditative and easy. It can be risky as well.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because there are people who are just getting insane when they see a insect walk. It's like, oh my God, spider, or something like that. Did you found, like, in your therapy, that if you have people like that, then it kind of doesn't work? Or like, do you vet people before you take them? I was like, are you afraid of spiders? Are you afraid of the dark? Are you?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And vet feels like the appropriate word, but no, it's not quite. I find maybe it's quite self-selecting, so that people that usually want to try outdoor therapy, perhaps in the very least have a curiosity they want to explore, or they are already quite interested in the outdoors, or they have some sense that being outside in the rest of nature supports them. I haven't yet worked with anyone who's almost ended up doing outdoor therapy, even though they don't really want to be there. So I don't know, but I do always start with a kind of an assessment to see. But often it amounts to, how are you with dogs? Because obviously dog walkers are the main things you come across. And what's your existing relationship with nature? And those are the two things I'm interested in. And I hope that if people are terrified of insects and stuff, then they would say, or perhaps just not contact me. Unless, of course, it was a phobia. Because I suppose you could do good phobia work outside and gradually,
like
help
inoculating people to the presence of creeping creatures.
But I would be very interested if someone got in touch and they weren't really into being outside, to choose that. As I would quite like to work with somebody like that. I think that would be really interesting, because even they're still inquiring, so they must have something in them, that disconnection that wants to be reconnected. So. Right,
and can you? Do you see like a pattern in people who are kind of contacting you and going to work with you, that these are people who are missing this connection, or you don't see anything kind of like in common?
I don't think I do see any particular pattern. I think the main thing I see is that people are in some way, they're interested in the process of outdoor therapy because they're interested in being outdoors. Quite often what people will say to me about my work, or if they've seen a talk or they've come to a workshop, is, this all makes so much sense. I always knew it, but I couldn't quite put words to it. So I'm not doing anything or speaking about anything that is way out there for people. It's just that it's taking the time to consolidate that into almost a pathway for healing or recovery, or whatever you want to call it, for treatment in the medicalized language. So it's, we know this, we intrinsically know when we go outside that it feels good. So it doesn't take much for people to buy into it. Right. It's natural.
Listen, I am interested in another thing, because obviously we had a few exchanges online, and I follow your Twitter, your Instagram, and by the way, everybody who listens to that, they should also follow your Instagram and your Twitter. But I'm going to talk about negativity, and you touch on the important thing, like how people deal with negativity. Right, and I have a very specific question related to negativity and the outdoors, but I just don't want to jump right now for that question. Right, I want like kind of start.
You're holding out.
Yes, because obviously, especially. I don't know if especially now in these days in social media and a constant bombardment of everything, and obviously bad news sells well. So we're getting bombarded with that a lot. And do you see like these outdoors, being in the outdoors in nature, almost like a panacea for that negativity, for that constant, flow of information?
I don't see anything as a panacea, and I don't think that nature and connection with nature is. I know that some people feel that, if you just go outside, it will cure all ills. You just have to go outside and you'll have no anxiety or no depression. Or I don't buy it. I think we're designed to be part of a whole ecology, and that is being also in relationship with our own species. And there's so many variables and things that have to be in tune. You can spend all your time outside, but if your relationships with other people are dysfunctional or broken or in any other way challenged, you can't spend your whole life outside ignoring it. And that's also not going to help you. So I'm always very wary of people that say, outdoors is a panacea to everything. I think it has its place, and what we want is people to live balanced lives where a good connection with nature that serves themselves and serves nature and serves others is the aim. But that's not very sexy, is it? The modern world wants us to be like, oh yeah, there's the miracle cure, there's the nature cure. And this is the cure to your life and your negativity and the way the world is. Just go outside and outside is free. Just go and have fun. Use it as your playground. And I think it's all of that I find quite problematic.
Right.
I don't know if that's actually what you were asking, but that's where it's.
No, I was like, we get it. We're getting there. It's part of the bigger topic. Because where I started is with this flow of negativity, right? And part of the idea is like cut off all your, or at least periodically, like just go offline.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Right? Just cut that. But it is kind of, and this is something I'm struggling as well, trying to figure out where is the boundary between I am just gonna cut off this constant flow of bad news and everything, like oceans are on fire and this and that and Trump said and whatever, and be outdoors and be enjoying all that, and how much this is a good thing to do and how much this is kind of like a putting head in the sand.
Yeah.
And, where is the
it's very hard, isn't it? And I think it's a delicate balance daily, depending on where you're at emotionally with things, how robust you're feeling. I think it's great to step away and to shut down sometimes from the bad news and the negativity. But I'm not in favor of a toxic positivity either, that we all just have to present content and say things that make everyone else feel better. I think we have to find ways to balance truth speaking, allowing negativity and difficult emotions and difficult thoughts and feelings and things people are saying, and just learn to be nuanced with it. And so that kind of endless dance of going in and out of things. So log off sometimes, go and immerse yourself in nature, but come back and engage meaningfully or purposefully. So I don't know. I feel like there isn't. I don't know what to do with it either. I think about it all the time, is how to hold both of these things in a kind of a intention, really.
Yeah. And do you think that when you're, and obviously you're also in your bio, you're talking about connection with nature and planetary health and the relation between human and nature, and talking about outdoors topics, it's impossible almost to not constantly touching on negative stuff, right? Climate change, biodiversity loss, extinction, all these things, and even interacting with people who are either online or my guests on the podcast, sometimes, like, especially when you're in the area of conservation or in the area of rewilding or whatever that is, a lot of time all communication is absolutely dominated by all the negativity. Like this. And I had many times, it was mentioned many times, and especially with my friend Porrick Fogarty, who's a campaign officer on Irish Wildlife Trust. And Porrick, if you're listening to this, I love you, man. But he's like, sometimes I can take it. Like the messaging is, and he said, like, people were talking about, you cannot do all the negativity, all this, you need to put the positive message. And I was trying that. But then when I see all this, I stopped it, and I'm only, ringing the bell all the time, all the negativity. And I personally, I don't know how he can.
But we don't respond to that well, do we? Humans don't cope very well with endless negativity and
please tell us about it, because I know that certainly I don't. Like I at some point I just shut down. I think your experience sounds true, probably, I would imagine, of the general human experience, that we have a certain capacity, but then we come to a point where we become quite numb or quite shut off from or quite desensitized to. And so I think it's important that firstly, we re-engage with the numb parts. Why have they gone numb? But also to mix a message of hope in there as well. I mean, it's about motivation and purpose, isn't it? And if all you ever hear is it's over, it's doom and gloom, everything is done, it's not motivating. Yeah, exactly.
And nobody ever did anything out of being shamed that was true or authentic. I think we can shame people into things, and maybe behaviorally for a little while they'll do it, but it doesn't bear out really long term. People are motivated when when they know the good reasons for something, when they see the rationale, when they feel that they can have autonomy and agency over something. They're more likely to do something positive. Just saying, you must not, it doesn't work. It creates short-term gains. So I think in terms of climate, we have to say this is the true picture, but these are the ways that you can be hopeful and purposeful and contribute in a way that gives you a sense of agency. I think that's really important. I think we're built that way. We need to have a mix. We need to have things to strive for, to care about, to feel excited by. And so a constant narrative of negativity is, I don't think, helpful. But it is about being realistic, isn't it? Because we can't be denying climate change and things like that. But you're right. The underlying cogs of the machinery here is that media wants to depress you with all of the awfulness.
Yes.
And so I don't know. We have to find our own way to. I think it's about purpose. It's about, okay, this is awful. However, can I still contribute something? Can I still find joy in engaging with difficult things? And
Yeah. I think you're right. But it's hard sometimes. I'm really maybe not afraid, but I'm kind of worried that we can lose that joy of being outdoors by because you go fishing, and in the back of the head you have all this information like the oceans are full of plastic, and we have a microplastic everywhere, and all the species are endangered or critically endangered, and shifting baseline, we were catching this many fish 10 years ago, and now is this, and you're like, I find it gradually harder and harder to deal with.
It is harder, and I think it is harder and harder, and I suppose we have to ask ourselves, is this hard because I don't like having to change the things I used to do and the things that I naively thought were okay? Or is it hard because of some other reason? And I think sometimes we don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear because we think, well, what I'm doing, is it so bad? But, you know, if we all depleted stocks, if we all flew everywhere and did everything and just kind of, you know, ripped stuff out the ground, made stuff and buried it back in landfill, which is kind of what we do, isn't it? We rip out the minerals, we make stuff, and then we chuck it away.
Exactly.
You know, if we all just lived as we wanted to, just like in those glory days in our minds of, you know, I just do what I want and there's no repercussions, then we're not going to have a living planet. So I think there's something about we have to engage. We want joy. We want to still love these things. And it's very difficult for us to really let in the idea that maybe some of our behaviors might be destructive and maybe we have to rein something in. So we kind of get a bit defensive about it. And it's like, I just want to enjoy myself. It's my right. So I don't know. I think we have to be quite honest with ourselves, and that can be quite a big step, because it involves some shaming of ourselves. It involves some sort of having to admit to ourselves that maybe some of our own behaviors haven't been very sustainable or very kind to the planet when you put them together en masse. And that's not an easy thing to face, is it? Our own culpability.
Yeah, but that is an interesting point. Like, was it by our own, you mean like personal, or our own as a species, or as a you know, kind of tribe you belong?
Well, it's the different intersections, isn't it? Because it's individual, it's societal. I mean, I think I read somewhere at the beginning of lockdown that only 6% of people have ever flown. So there's certain ways you can slice the cake and say, well, actually the huge disproportionate burden of, you know, kind of flight carbon footprint is coming from the Western world, the affluent Western world. So maybe we, in that sense, is we affluent Western world, but sometimes I often think it's not about individuals. It's what happens when we are together as a species. And if we're thinking individualistically, we'll always say, well, it's okay because I'm not doing loads myself. But when you put 6 billion of us together, so I don't know. I think we just have to get more clever at looking at the ecology of our impact. We have to sort of be like, well, you know, is it governmental? Is it a tribe level? Is it community? And
you know,
it still starts with the individual, though, doesn't it? Meaningful change is where communities built up of individuals. So is that something that you notice is impacting you when you're taking people into the outdoors and you know, try to get them reconnect with nature and kind of, you know, inhale these therapeutical properties of being outdoors, and then there's this thing and you go like, oh, I didn't, you know, it didn't supposed to go this way. And the reason I'm asking this question, I have a very specific example, and I think I saw on Instagram your posted a picture of hills, of the mountains. Right? It's a beautiful mountain, and like mountain looks in Scotland and in Ireland. And I also thought that they're beautiful, and I like that, right? And then again, I was kind of educated that there's nothing beautiful because it's a dead landscape. It's overgrazed. It's called wet desert, minimum biological capacity, and destruction of the environment, everything. And now I'm thinking, and once you know those things, right, it kind of stuck in your brain. So now you go to your beautiful walk, you stand on the top of the hill, and instead of saying like, what a beautiful landscape, all that's in your mind is like, it's a wet desert, it's a dead landscape, it's landscape of death, it's overgrazed through the generation of sheep on the hills, and like, right, it's like, oh, I better go. That's so funny. Yeah, no, I have been there and I have thought that, and I think I oscillate between that position and still trying to find the beauty in the dead wet landscape. Because I think, you know, still visually it's very striking, and yes, it's not what it would have been, but in a way, my brain doesn't know that. My brain has a visual response to what is. And this is a lot of the problem in a way, isn't it?
Yes.
Is that we don't remember when, major fauna were roaming the world, roaming our country and our landscape. So we can't emotionally connect with it. And so we just see what's in front of us. And of course, we're going to look at that and think, oh, that's lovely. Or I like the lines of that. Or we'll look at a fragment of forest and we'll be like, oh, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. And then we're told, oh, yes, well, it's only 1% of what it should have been.
Yeah. And it's a non-native toxic Sitka spruce. And that's a timber plantation. Like, what are you saying?
And all you think is like, oh, yeah, but to me, that's really cool because that's all I know. And so I think we have to find a way of balancing, like not destroying people's joy and love, but also saying, yeah, maybe it's, this is great and it could be better because it was once better or something. And I don't think we've cracked that yet. I think we're too willing just to slam down on people and go, no, it's a wet desert. Don't appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I think, but at the same time, and as we're saying, can we be left to believe that this is exactly what it should look like and that this is really healthy? I mean, ethically, do we just let people stay ignorant to it?
That's an excellent question. What do you think? What's your own gut feeling on that?
I think we all deserve to know the way things are to the best of our current knowledge. So if it's a wet, dead desert, I think that I somehow need to know that. But I think I need to know how to do something about that. Or I need to know what's being done to rectify that and how I can play a part. I don't think it's good enough to stay in ignorance. Yeah. I just don't think that's just me and my moral compass. I just think we have to, a lot of problems in society have come about through us turning a blind eye, whether that's to racism, to environmental degradation. But I do think we can't break people's spirit. And I think there's a danger, certainly this year, this year of all years, that there's a lot of broken spirits around. I remember a time when people used to talk about the future and people used to talk about the 21st century being like the future, and it was exciting. And now nobody talks about it because there's climate change, there's COVID, there's Brexit, there's racism, it's hard, and it shuts down, and so we don't have that hope. And I think we need to have a renewed vision of the future.
That's an excellent point. And how much do you think this is related to such a saturation of information and such an availability of information, and obviously that filter that all that information goes through? It's almost like if it's a good news, it doesn't make a cut because like nobody, because quite often, and I don't want to give any particular examples, but there's often like many of these things were happening before. We just didn't hear about them. Yeah. And how much it is, one of my favorite things is, for example, Lyme disease, where we hear about a lot of that, right?
One of your favorite things.
Yeah. I like to bring that example as if you go back 30, 40, 50 years and you talk to farmers, that they cannot go outside in the field and they have ticks and they got this Lyme disease and it's all terrible and so on, they would laugh at you. I was like, what is it, right? And but that still was there, right? So to what extent certain things are unnaturally amplified, and they're kind of this such a big monsters now that we have to deal with, why they were, you know what I mean? It's like
I do know what you mean, and I think it's hard sometimes to discern the real things we should be worried about and the things that have become monsters, kind of, or folk devils, or whatever you want to call them, that have been amplified because there's some agenda for that. And it's very hard when you're part of the same matrix, isn't it? When you're part of the matrix, to be able to exit the matrix and see it the way it really is. So I think that there are things that are undeniably important and different, and I think probably climate change is one. And I think our population, the global population, is continuing to grow and grow and grow, and loss of biodiversity. That's not to say that on a geological timescale this is rare. It's just that it's most relevant for us now in our tiny timescale. But do I think that every single thing that the news throws up is something to worry about? No, because I think you're right. I think a lot of things have always been around. And it's just, and we're not designed to have all of this information. We're not biologically created that way, are we? I mean, we would have lived in smaller communities. I think evolutionarily we're still very primitive. We've got quite lizardy brains. Mm-hmm. So I think, it's like in the is it Jaron Lanier's book 10 Reasons to Quit Social Media. Right now he talks, or in the recent Netflix thing, The Social Dilemma, there's this idea that we're not designed to have the validation of 10,000 strangers on social media. Mm-hmm. We're much more designed to have the input and validation of a small tribe, a community, family. And I think it's the same thing. We're not designed to know all of the world news, all of the bad things.
Yes.
We're designed to sort of know what's going on around us and to be, I think, take action accordingly, So I think that's a real argument, I think, for becoming much more place-based and knowing our place that's around us and knowing what's happening to it, what's happening to our local nature, and feeling that we can do something purposeful with that, because I think that is very positive, and you can start to see things, you can look at it through different lenses of time, and it's a manageable amount. I think the endless kind of, because as you say, things have always been happening over there when we couldn't see them, but now it's like, oh my God, what do I care about? And and it's often a lot of bad stuff. And I find that I have to be quite disciplined in managing the bad news and allowing the good news stories. So I make sure that things I read are a balance of. So I read, for example, Resurgence, an ecologist magazine, which I subscribe to, and it's very positive in as much as it talks about all of the kind of current concerns, but it's oriented around, projects, interesting community-led stuff. It's kind of got a hopeful message. So I think we need to be quite a lot more sophisticated than our biology has created.
You're right. We're completely, like, essentially we are the same as we were in the times of the cavemen. Mm-hmm. But now we have this tribe of thousands of friends, friends, right? Like, how do I manage 1,000 friends? They're not friends, really, are they? What tip would you give people to manage better their social media and their intake of information? Do you have any advice?
Joe, I find the best thing is to have very strict boundaries. I find for me, I can't be off of it forever. I would love to delete them. And there are times when I delete them for temporarily. Mm-hmm. So last year I took 3 months. I took the summer. I basically took from the summer solstice to the autumn equinox offline.
Yeah, awesome.
And that was really cool.
Were you like completely offline?
Not completely. So I still had my emails and I was still working online, like we're talking now. But I didn't, and I still browse. I still buy books, but off social media and those kind of all of that sort of stuff, off YouTube, off the apps. And I find it very valuable. However, I do think if you built a business or you're in any way in need of those platforms, because there are currently no other viable options, it would seem, for getting work out there. If that's what you need in a way professionally, we've got to find a way to live with it. And I know some people would say for as long as you're in it, then there's no escaping it, and that Silicon Valley will never do better. But I feel like, well, maybe that's true, but I still need to make a living, So
yeah, exactly.
So I'm a big advocate of being super boundaried. So and I forget, I totally do, but I'm increasingly, don't look before a certain time in the morning. Take time to be with yourself, to do your work or to read. ideally, my ideal day would look like log in at 12 or thereabouts, log in at lunchtime. So I've had a morning of kind of deep work, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And then log out maybe kind of 7 o'clock, maybe before dinner, and then have the evening to read, and then maybe nothing on the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
To just try and get into that routine of it not being central to our lives, or you know. But for everyone it won't be. I think it's perhaps, you know, if you use it a lot, I use it a lot, and I use it for work as mainly, not personal. So but I think boundaries is the way forward. But you're still the product. You're still your data is still in there. You're still part of the same anxiety machine, as I would call it.
Well, exactly, because we all know that this is all designed that way to fuel that addiction, right? It's the same mechanism as addiction, where I think it's a dopamine addiction, right? Each time someone liked your post, and then you ended up like this experiment with the rats. That they were coming back, and we almost like the rats are coming back to your Instagram, to your Twitter.
Well, and they keep you sufficiently bought in, because sometimes, you know, the algorithm means that nobody sees your stuff. So then you try really hard to try and keep it. Then you get some engagement and you think, oh, I'm doing it right. So in any case, they get you there working hard. And I think, you know, okay, but you know, we have to take it on ourselves to do better, don't we? And to look after ourselves. And, you know, when I log off, I often, it's not just don't use them. I log off. Sometimes I delete the app and reinstall after the weekend. Sometimes even the next day. It's giving that extra point of when it would just be easy, just to behaviorally, just because it's like a muscle memory.
Yes. Yes, I don't even like why am I looking at it? I don't even remember opening that, and here it is. I'm reading about another thing.
I mean, I find that very scary, and I think imagine if you could not do that for a start, but imagine if you could do that with other things, or the time that you waste from that. So, I mean, I don't know. I think I'm still trying to work it out myself. I just, I hope that anyone that I work with or anyone that listens to me, takes a sort of a sense of like, do your best. Do your best, because you're up against it. And when that's the same in terms of your building relationship with nature, social media, your health and well-being. It's like, just make steps. Like, don't thrash yourself with thinking you've got to get this right and that right. And because that just is more pressure in an already pressurized world.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have this protocol if you're taking somebody outdoors, you like at no phone, you're just like not looking at the phone? Is that the part of it?
Well, I think that happens naturally. I think most people, one thing I love about therapy is and it's a bit like this podcasting, it's like the last bastion of human conversation, you know, that isn't mediated through technology or someone looking at their phones. And sometimes, you know, clients will need to look at their phone. Sometimes it happens more online, actually, that the session will get distracted by someone looking at their phone or something. But I really love that quality, and I think other people do. I think we really value that time, but it's increasingly not available to us. And so actually to be able to come into therapy, put your phone in your pocket, you're not looking, you've got each other's undivided attention. It's quite special in itself, actually. And I think we could all do with more of that.
No doubt. No, it's you're absolutely right. Listen, another question, or like something I was thinking about, and it's you kind of mentioned that already, like, and especially as a geologist, right? You operate at massive time scales, right? And I must say that quite often I am finding comfort in almost like, this is like so small. Like we think that this is like the worst thing ever, right? The Trump said this and something burning over there, and then you look at it like a even time scale of a planet. And everything that's been through the dinosaurs, and before dinosaurs, the trilobites and all these things, they come and go. And now you think like, we think we are almost, as a species, so self-important, right? We are like, and I quite often find a comfort in kind of grabbing the time scales, like, well, actually, no matter what we do, it's not like planet doesn't need to be saved. We can only either save ourselves,
yeah,
or we're not gonna save ourselves. The planet will be fine, and the life on the planet will continue because, right, the planet was hit by the cosmic bullet and everything was wiped out. And look at this, it's back, right? Is that is that a part of it? Like, what's your comment?
I totally relate to that for myself. I mean, I don't know how other people feel, and I think some people perhaps are exasperated with me sometimes because I don't worry about a lot of things right now. I'm lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm not deeply prone to anxiety, and yet I work with it extensively. That's not to say I'm immune from it, but maybe it is partly having that geological training or mind, that appreciation of deep time. I tend to, when I'm feeling my most despairing about, for example, climate change, or there's all the bad news that you've read, I tend to fall back on this in the position of, oh, well, the planet will be better off without us anyway. We won't be here and it will recover. It kind of goes to that. It's quite a nihilistic place to go to, I suppose.
Yes, it is.
But I find it, but like you, I find some comfort in it. But that I don't let that tip over into, oh, well, I'll just be an idiot then and I'll just do whatever I want. It doesn't go, I don't go there with it. It doesn't make me hedonistic and reckless. It helps to temper the edges of anxiety, I suppose, or worries. So I think there is that massive timescale, but I find the other antidote is to get really micro timescale.
Oh,
it's like,
interesting.
Either go really big and really wide or really like the lived moment. And I'm really interested in, every second, like, how are you experiencing life? And I know we can't go through life constantly going, what now? And, but to really try and enjoy and I don't know, take fulfillment from and be content with each moment as it unfolds. And I think when we go into the middle ground of months and years, things start to feel hopeless or scary or frightening.
Yeah.
But in the moment of, what's in front of me, how do I feel in my body now? How's my mind doing? What excites me? What's beautiful in my eye line? I think when you can be there, that can offer a lot of joy. And the big time scale can offer a lot of comfort. So I think oscillating between those two is quite an interesting practice. And I've got really interested during lockdown in, I've got a new telescope. And so I'm spending quite a lot of time looking at, in this last week, we've seen Saturn and Jupiter, seen the rings of Saturn for the first time in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm like, with my own eyes. So I'm like, there's this fascinating kind of cosmology, there's this bigger picture, and I find it very useful just to go, oh yeah, there's Jupiter. There are things bigger than what I'm stressing about right now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's interesting.
But I think maybe we're not connected to that. Maybe we could all sort of try and connect more to the bigger cosmology of our lives and the bigger realms and the bigger landscapes as some sort of antidote.
I think that even when you're taking people for the walk in the outdoors, that naturally after a time kind of triggers this staying in the moment, right? The flow state, or I'm just concerned. And I think that I heard that a lot from military people who are going through, either difficulties during the deployment and during the missions, like just what is my next step? And I need to take my next step, and I need to make, and your entire focus is on your next thing you need to do in the next 5 seconds and 5 minutes, right? And this is kind of the same thing, I presume, when you go with people outdoors and you walk the mountains, or you walked all the mountains on foot, right? So surely this is
well, I don't know that I've walked all the mountains on foot. I've spent some time in a lot of the big ranges, but yeah, I think that being present to the moment in big landscapes and just focusing on that is a great tonic for a lot of things, and it's important for a lot of work in therapy, a lot of trauma work, a lot of, talk about the military, but working with PTSD and working with a lot of things, there's something very healing and very just very enlivening and very useful about working with what it is to be in our bodies in the present moment, and that next step, as you say, and the next step. And when you go on a physical journey in therapy, when we go out and we walk, to some degree you're embodying that intention, because you are taking the next step and taking the next step. And so you're kind of working it through internally and externally, and that's an interesting combination.
Yes. Yeah. Well, no doubt. Listen, just before we're going to wrap it up, I would like to hear more about your adventures in the mountains. And how does it started? Is it came from that line of geology and fascination with how the mountains were built, or was it?
Yeah, I think something connected with me and mountains in my late teens. I mean, I didn't grow up in an outdoorsy family. I didn't grow up in a mountain environment, although we did spend a lot of time in North Wales in the Snowdonia range, but on family holidays. But I think for a lot of years that wasn't so present. I think for me, when I was younger, I was always talking to animals. I was very connected to nature, but it was more about the animal world. And so I think as I got to my late teens, I just suddenly got captivated by mountains, and then I did a bit of travel. I wanted to study it, and it just grew and grew until last year I realized was the first time I'd taken a holiday that didn't have anything to do with mountains in about 15 years or something. Because it's just what I go for. I just I want to go to mountains. So it's just been an ever sort of increasing and sustaining thing since my late teens. And I just love them. And I think a couple of years ago I did 2018 now, God, how's that happened? I did the Bosnia trip, and I was due to be going back this year to do the next leg from Montenegro, the border with Montenegro, to the border with Albania. And that obviously got delayed because of COVID. But I just find they're the best places to get perspective, to go on an inner journey. And I love trips by myself. I mean, I love trips with other people as well. But I think there's to make time every year to do something alone that's kind of soul enriching and is challenging and gets you out there and having to rely on yourself a little bit.
Are you camping during those trips, or you have your tent?
Yeah, so in Bosnia it was 2 weeks of sort of wild camping, and would dip in and out of kind of more local towns or villages to resupply, and sometimes to stay somewhere and get a shower. But just my little tent, little sleeping bag, and food, and heading off into the wild a little bit. Right.
And is that something that you're doing, or you consider doing with people you're working with, to get them out and let them experience this slow down?
I do I would love to do more of it. I do offer sort of multi-day bespoke packages, I suppose, a bit like coaching, where we might go outside, but because it's multi-day, the pace is a lot different. So in some ways it's being there, witnessing and helping someone to build their confidence. But I haven't yet gone down the route of doing it with a group, or having an organized. I think for me, what I'm still trying to work out is, do I want to run a holiday and a walking holiday, or do I want to do therapy? And I haven't got any desire to take people on a walking holiday. I don't just want to be someone's walking guide. So I'm still trying to work out how it could be done. And I think the best way I've found so far is just to sort of do it myself and tell people about it, and hope that it inspires them to go and do their own. Because I think they're very it's very enriching. But I do sort of day length things where we'll go and we'll walk together, and that simulates it a bit. But as you say, there's something that the compound interest of that over like 2 weeks, a week or 2 weeks, and even more and more coming into yourself and your body and into nature and really slowing down. You can't simulate that in a day. It has to. Yeah, it has absolutely. You have to give that your time and your attention, I think.
What advice would you give to anyone who is listening now to this and say, like, well, I would like to try that, being in nature for a day or 2 days, kind of get, alone with himself almost, right? Because this is often what we missing and we don't even realize, right? I always think about a person who comes to the room and the first thing they do, they turn on the radio, turn on the TV.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you listening to that? No, I'm not listening.
I just need the noise.
Yeah, they even tell you, like, I'm not listening. But then when you turn it off, it's like they also almost feel like uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I think a lot
all this time.
I think we've had is it John O'Donoghue that called it the evacuation of interiority. Like, we have forgotten how to be with ourselves, and social media fills all the gaps for us, and so we're losing the art of solitude. And I think I would encourage, in terms of tips, I would say, I'm very used to my own company. I like it. I've been cultivating it for years. I try and spend time every day by myself, and when I'm on my own, I don't listen to a lot. I don't have a lot of stuff going on. I like it to be quite quiet. But I think if you're not that person, you have to start off taking an appraisal of what would be a step up for me, what would be a step in the right direction. Because I think you can end up having a horrible experience if you go from being somebody that can't even have the radio off because you can't bear your own thoughts to 2 weeks in the wild.
Yeah, that wouldn't end up well.
So I think we have to, treat solitude as a discipline and a practice, and, start by having 15 minutes to yourself in the morning with a cup of tea or coffee, not doing anything but sitting with yourself, and build up to maybe a day or half a day, then a day, and then maybe an overnighter, and plan for it. Plan for where you want to get to. Maybe you want to have a 2 week, 3 week trip. But how are you going to get there, and what else could you do before? Because it is challenging, and I found that in Bosnia on my own, day in, day out, and I didn't have any books, I didn't have any podcasts, I didn't have anything. It was very, very stripped back, and it was total solitude. There was nobody around in the mountains, really. It's a lot to be alone with yourself, and I realized my own sort of mental fragility, and I would have went into that considering, I've got this, I can do this. So I think we have to kind of retrain ourselves to do that. So I would say, take your time, spend a bit of time every day, and build up to whatever your goal is. Because we're really not built for that either, right? The same way as we're not built for having 1,000 or 5,000 online friends, we also know. Yeah, we're not designed to be hermits either, are we? I mean, we're very much about, and I love this idea of solitude, that going out on our own and time alone is a way of coming back to others. That we're not looking at two kind of, you have to be that or that. It's like it helps resource me to come back and be good for other people. So I think, and we're relational creatures. We're not designed just to go and sit in a cave and twiddle our thumbs and be by ourselves. As tempting as sometimes it feels, I think we have to learn to balance the two. But I think we've gone the wrong way. We've become entirely, I was going to say entirely relational, but we're not. We're entirely in the company of others. We're not necessarily actually having good relationships, and we've forgotten the lost art of how to be with ourselves.
Yes.
So I think we need to redress that balance. I don't think most people aren't in danger of too much solitude, although of course it's a very real problem, the social problem of loneliness, but that's different. I think loneliness is the erroneous cousin of solitude. It's the darker side.
Yes, because you can be surrounded by people like hundreds. This is especially something that you can witness or feel like in a city, in a big city,
Yeah.
right? When you're in a, I don't know, in a subway or in a street, and
Oh, yeah.
you are alone, but there's
I
like
feel very lonely when I go to London, for example, and yet 2 weeks in Bosnia by myself, I didn't feel lonely once.
Mhm.
It's it's got a different quality altogether. And I think that being amongst others that we don't feel a connection with is especially lonely, isn't it? You can be very lonely in a relationship in your life because
Mhm.
they're there, but they're not there. And that's what social media has done to a lot of us is, you know, we're almost there. We're a friend, we're a follower, and we convince ourselves if I just look at all their stories and posts, then that's true connection. But what is it really?
Yeah.
It's still quite lonely because it's not this, is it? So
Yeah.
yeah, I think tolerating solitude is about balancing loneliness with the purposeful time alone, which can be very enriching if we're not afraid of it.
I like what you said. It's like almost like a way of coming back and kind of bringing inside you something you can offer to all the other people. What final word or what final advice would you give to the listeners of my podcast, mainly outdoors people, but also I presume people very heavily social media embedded, like we all, in fairness, like we all, I noticed that myself, that since I never had a Facebook, and like in my personal, I opened Facebook page for the podcast, just for other people who are on Facebook. But with all the, social media where I found this, like, sometimes it's like, oh no, it's too much. And I'm kind of like, I have this way of falling back to that. I'm a content creator. I'm just putting stuff out, and I'm not necessarily need to catch up with, like you said, every post, every story, and every photo someone else. It's just like, I'm putting stuff out there for people to enjoy. But that's kind of like a different thing. But what would you say, even from the perspective of how to check yourself? Are you not, heading down the wrong way, almost, kind of?
Big question. I think encourage people to take an honest look at the behaviors when you're starting to develop weird behaviors and kind of automatic stuff, and you're losing time. And suddenly you come around, like, I've spent 20 minutes mindlessly scrolling through 4 apps, like an automaton. I think, become aware and be honest with yourself. But generally, I'd say, reclaim relationships. I think make time for them, reclaim them. Is what you're engaging in, is it satisfying that? I think we need meaningful relationships. And I think that goes with, when I say that, I mean that about our relationship with the rest of nature as well. It's don't just go outside and use it as a playground. It's one of my worst things. I hate that. It's like, as soon as we sort of devalue it in that way and just say it's for our utility, it's for our fun, then we lose that very precious quality of relationship. Go out and have meaningful experiences, whether you're fishing, whether you're running, like, go and let it mean something to you, engage with it, talk with the world, whatever that means for you. It doesn't necessarily mean words. It's a kind of a living, it can be very secular, it can, but it's go out and where your time and your effort with nature is like a prayer. It's, I think that quality of relationship is what we're in danger of missing with social media when everything has become content. So I would just say to people, check in with yourself. How much are you just churning out content? Are you just doing stuff to tick boxes? Are you just wading through a to-do list? And how much are you actually reclaiming the beauty of contact and encounter and experience with the other, whether that's through on a screen or if it's with the natural world? Because I think that's what's being eroded the most and the fastest is our relationships.
Yes. Fantastic. Ruth, listen, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
The best way, if people want to, just show appreciation, then I guess _Ruth on Instagram is the best way. That's where I usually am. If people want to ask anything more specific or are interested in my work, I say visit my website, which is whitepeakwellbeing.com, or email me, which is ruth@whitepeakwellbeing.com. And that's usually the most reliable way, because as I say, I'll go on and off social media, but I will always at some point see my emails. Yeah.
It's very healthy. Listen, Ruth, thank you very much for that conversation. It's been great, and it's always nice. Thank you, and let's stay in touch. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.